we now have Comrade Saremu with us, who is Director General, Michael Imodu, National Institute for Labor Studies. He's also right there in our Abuja studio. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Comrade. Well, you have put out a memo, kind of release, spoken about this whole striking doctors thing. And here is another one, and an imminent strike of senior doctors. And it's all talking about how well government is considering the welfare of medical practitioners in the country. How does this come across to you as a labor leader?
Well, as a labor leader and also as Director General, as you have introduced me, Ayo, let me say good morning to you, and of course through you to all our listeners. It's very interesting. I mean, I'm excited that at least you are on duty, you are not on strike, and then we can analyze the strikes because it seems strike has become the commonest thing now. But on the more serious note, the way I want to put it is that I think it's time for serious reflections, on how we handle labor issues in Nigeria. I think what has come out of this series of strikes, whether you take the resident doctor strikes, the pending one which Professor Ken had analyzed for us here, I think it is clear that we must come to terms about the importance of labor in service delivery in this country. I think for a long time, we've not taken labor seriously. I like, this remark by King Khatum, of UAE, in his book, My Vision, which says that, the best asset for any nation is human resource. I think we must come to terms with that. And interestingly, the 1999 Constitution emphasized the primacy of labor as an important factor of development. It's very interesting that we are now knowing labor only when there are strikes. I think it's important that we recognize that the health sectors, just like education sectors, are being managed by working people. In this case, doctors. You have seasoned consultants, medical and dental consultants that we have here. So I think it's important, even with that strike, we must focus on labor. And the media has a lot of role to play with this. You devote a lot of time analyzing capital market, financial market. I think it's time for us to start discussing what goes on in the labor market. We go to hospitals, we've forgotten that workers are the one delivering services. They're doctors, nurses, under which condition they are working. So we don't need to know labor only when there are strikes. We must know how they are managing under a very difficult condition. Then the second one,
just one second, before you go to that second one, just 1 second before you go to that second one, we need to take a couple of messages. But it's interesting that you say that the media is the one always doing it. I can't even imagine a time that the media will go on strike. Please don't imagine it. We'll be back after these messages. Thanks for staying with us. Still looking at the issues around, can we call it a crisis in the labor market, in the health sector, at least alluding to what Comrade Saremu has just told us. DG Michael Imodu, National Institute for Labor Studies in Ilorin. He's in our Abuja studio right now. Well, Comrade, you were trying to tell us some of the things that we should be paying attention to. You're on item 2. Please go ahead.
Yeah, well, I'm happy that you really listened to me. What I'm saying here is that since you couldn't imagine that media will go on strike, then I think listeners should imagine what you go through every day, to come to work before the sun rises, only for you to be working tirelessly for almost 2 hours. I think it's important that we dignify labor. I think that's the point I'm raising. That when things are normal, when there are no strikes, some workers are working quite silently in a very difficult environment. I think this is what the strikes have brought out. Then the second one, Ayo, is that it is time for us to move from work to what the ILO, International Labour Organization, called decent work. Decent work is the one that makes a working man and a woman to gradually move out of poverty, to overcome income poverty. You can progress in your career, you can save money, you can live on your pay. That used to be the case. In those days, once you're a worker, you're out of poverty. I mean, I had working parents. My mother worked in a public service, and it was through a little pay that I went to school. But today, you have working poor. I think that's what is happening. So I think we need to talk of decent work. And the one that I find unacceptable is the idea of delayed payment of salary, non-payment of salary. It's wage theft. I've said so before. In fact, I recollect President Muhammad Buhari in one of the meetings, and I highly commended the president that time. I issued a press statement. He said, when you don't forget that when he came to office, about 23 states couldn't pay their workers. And the president looked at them and said, wait, how do you sleep, these governors, without paying your workers? I mean, that's the way it should be. Because when you pay this salary, I mean, most workers can hardly survive in a month. Yet you delay, you don't pay them. And because of that, President Buhari went, out of the box. Even though we're in the federation, he gave bailout 1, bailout 2, bailout 3 through the intervention of CBN to help the state government. I think we should promote decent work. What we have in our hand, Ayo, is crisis of compensation. For people, I mean, people, workers work. In the case of doctors, 1 month through 2-3 months, they are not paid. Now, the third one, I want to
just one second.
Let me quickly come to the Ion.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. But I just wanted to quickly follow up on what you said about, the president, saying that,
Okay.
How do the doctors sleep? I'm wondering what he would say to his ministers now. How do the ministers sleep when they know that the resident doctors haven't been paid for X number of months, and these senior doctors themselves are not getting their dues as and when, and not even commensurate, according to the president of the MD-CAN?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, that they should follow the line footstep of the president of the republic. This president keeps faith with his workers. Core civil servants are paid as I went due. I'm also presiding over an institute, and I know my workers are paid as I went due. So the federal is doing so. The ministers also, the MDAs also have to follow that line. And I think in this case, the two ministers we have in the not even ministers of labor, the first point of call is the sector ministry. They must be seen to be on duty to make sure that CMDs, engage with their doctors, they pay them as and when due. So ministers have to follow the footsteps of the president, who is already paying salary as and when due. That's the point I'm raising. Then the third one is that even with the best of effort, you pay as and when due, there will always be conflict at work. Nigeria has set of robust labor market institutions in this country. I mean, I'm also a labor man. I've been in the labor movement for close to 40 years. I can bear witness that we have industrial arbitration panel. We are supposed to have negotiating structures. We have the, NIC, National Industrial Court. If you couldn't get industrial justice at the IAP, you can move to National Industrial Court. Not only that, there are supposed to be negotiating machineries, and you have the National Advisory Labor Council, which has just been constituted recently by the two ministers, namely Minister Ngigi and Festus Keyamo. I mean, they did very well to make that council to be active. So we should take advantage of these institutions. What I've seen in the health sector now is that there's a collapse of industrial relations system. In fact, there's chaos there. And I think it's important all the parties return back to institutions that have been put in place to regulate the work relations. If there are breakdowns, we should be able to dialogue, we should be able to talk. Now you read in the newspaper and you also see, I mean, I'm just listening to Professor Ken. Very good point he has been raising about the challenges of payment of academic doctors, if I want to put it that way, and those serving doctors. Those are the things should be discussed at the negotiating table. I mean, it's fine that we hear this through the channels, but it will be better for us to really trade. I've never seen two disputants who are exchanging arguments to get any result. You have to have a culture of discussion and negotiation. And I think this is what we have seen. Wherever you see sectors that are working very well, the institutions of collective bargaining are working. Okay. So the last one I want to raise is that there's serious knowledge gap about labor issues. And we must labor issue has become, labor market has become all commerce affairs. I think it's a specialized field, of its own. And this way, I think the National Institute for Labor Studies, it's been there for almost about 40 years now. And for over the time, it's charged with responsibility of building capacity for the state actors, private sector employers, trade unions, so that we'll be able to know how to handle labor. Because let me tell you, Ayo, we can't drive this economy in the condition of constant crisis in which there are work stoppages. Even when there are no strikes, we are poor. when
you say,
is it when we are out of work that we do so? So I want to say here.
When you say knowledge gap.
Let me quickly wrap up here on this level.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Ayo, so what I want to say here is that I think it's also important that we return back to knowledge-driven industrial relations system. I listened to Professor Kent very well. You have problem with your classification. If I get it very well, your grading and not sort. That doesn't mean you have not said that you are not being paid. Salaries. You haven't said so. It is about classification. Now, in the world of industrial relation, it is dispute of interest, not dispute of right. This is specialized field, labor studies. Now, if it is dispute of interest, your approach will be different. You don't grant the whole country withdraw your services just because you want proper classification. What you need to do is to do engagement, to do consultation. And interestingly, Professor Ken, let me also disclose to you, I serve on the Salary and Wages Commission, and I know your issues had come up on one or two occasions, but we need to do constant engagement. These are issues that we can resolve, without necessarily granting tools, in a way that, and for strategic sector like S sectors, strikes.
Prof, just one, comrade, just 1 second. On this same matter, my apologies, comrade. You heard him, and gratifying to know what you have revealed to us. He said they have been trying to engage for 10 years. That same commission that you sit on. And they haven't been able to make any significant progress.
No, absolutely. I mean, I definitely agree with you very well that there's all the labor market institution we put in place, including wages and salary commission, will be much more active than the way we have it today. But even with the best of activism, whether it's going to be with the negotiating structure or the wages commission, what I'm saying here is that we can't be tired of those engagement to get the result done. And I also know that the wages commission now, under the chairmanship of Professor Ita, EPO, has been very, very. I mean, even the increase in the allowances during the time of pandemic, of the medical doctors, frontline workers, it came directly from the initiative of Wages Commission. So what I'm saying here is that we need to find a way to do those engagements so that in the process of solving the problem, we don't create another round of problem. Okay, now, the last point I wanted to raise with you, Ayo, is that...
My apologies. So that we can have a conversation. My apologies for butting in again. Now, what do you think the associations should have done that they haven't done over the past 10 years? When they write letters, according to Prof, you heard him speak, they would get no response from anyone, not even the office of the chairman that you just praised for doing a great job. And I believe, you are a labor man, so you will not just, praise anyone without the person doing what you said that he's been doing. So if they have been having letters, if they have been sending letters to the commission and they have not been getting any feedback for 10 years, no one is saying anything, no one is, responding to any of their letters. This is perhaps one way that the conversation can be taken further.
No, I have a very good point you raise. In fact, not just the medical consultants and the dental consultants. Consistently, Nigerian Medical Association and the non-resident doctors, they make the point that several times you write, there are no acknowledgement, you don't call them to the meeting, you don't engage them the way they should. Now, I absolutely agree with you that we need to dignify workers and their organizations. And simple industrial relations system is that you acknowledge data, you engage, you do so. So it's unacceptable. But even at that, Ayo, let me underscore this point. I used to be the General Secretary of Textile Workers Union. For the past 25 years, I mean, you know, on this your platform, I've been here to do advocacy, you know, on how to save the industry, how to fight against smuggling, how to do so. It's a long road, you know, to get things done. But I would not say because of that, you close down the existing factories, you know, that are barely surviving. You know, so that's the point I'm raising. But the second point, to also make the discussion very healthy, is that the associations are not the same thing as trade unions. It's very, very important. You know, I think one of the basic problems that I guess the medical dentals, you know, dentists, you know, and the consultants, you know, association may have is that these are associations just like National Association of Resident Doctors. They are not trade unions, as we know the trade unions that are affiliated to Nigeria Labour Congress and trade union congresses. It's also important that they need this affiliation engagement, because those are the trade unions that can make representation in an organized way, you know, to represent them very well. You know, so I also want to, that now raises the point that we must also, in the long run, I'm raising this issue so that, you know, don't forget that this is a recurring issue. 2014, President Jonathan, you know, actually ordered the sacking of 4 resident doctors when we had similar strike that happened. So it has been there for a long time, you know, and it was over the issue of residency payment, you know, crisis. It took a long time. I actually wrote an article about that time to say, no, you don't massacre workers, but also warn against, you know, methods that do not represent the interests of the workers in the long run. So the point I want to raise is that I think we need capacity building for the actors in the labor market, especially associations. If they want to behave like unions, they must follow union rules. You know, and what are the union rules? The union rules, I mean, I've engaged in strike when it's necessary, but strikes are temporary stoppages. You know, the idea of indefinite open-ended strikes, you know, in which we count more casualties after the strike. At the end of the day, you don't get any result. For me, that's not the kind of trade unionism that is enforced by our labor law. So
okay, but in order for that to happen,
also not only that.
Yeah, just a moment, comrade. In order for that to not happen, just a second, kindly listen. In order for that to not happen, for there not to be any form of strike, much less a protracted one, perhaps there is a need for the authorities to do the needful, especially for essential services, you know, people. I mean, you know, of course, you've been there long enough to know that there is an Essential Services Act, part of the Trade Union Act, which is to ensure that those who are not supposed to go on strike, health workers, electricity workers, security officials, do not go on strike. But a situation where they are unable to get the things that are due to them, is there a law or any form of processing in government that ensures that the essential services workers never resolve or resort to this kind of action?
No, whether essential or non-essentials, I've told you, workers have to be well paid. You know, you pay them as a when due, because these are the underlying currents that are pushing this protest. Then secondly, if there are issues arising from, you know, managing the compensation for them, you must listen to their leaders, you must call them to meeting, you must factor them, you must dialogue with them as much as possible. Those are the factors driving them. I mean, even the strike that we talk about now, you know, strikes are just the formalized form of protest. You also know there are unofficial strikes that may be going on in the hospitals. What I mean here is that doctors will be doing moonlighting, they do parallel jobs, they are not motivated to do the work. That's another form of strike. I don't think that's the kind of thing that we're looking forward to. So I don't think doctors have to go on strike, or nurses, you know, medical personnel have to go on strike before government knows that you must engage them. So the first thing is that engage them very well, motivate them, have respect for collective agreement, you know, make sure you don't go to agreements that you cannot enforce. You know, it's unacceptable for you to delay workers' pay. I've said so, it's wage robbery. But even with the best of effort, there will be conflict at work. Now, how do we resolve the conflict? The point I'm raising here is that conflict at work, they are not necessarily wars. You know, they are not supposed to be mutually destructive engagement. They have to be things that we can resolve, you know, through negotiation and discussion. So the way forward, I want to put it this way, Ayo, it's very simple. I think all the parties must overcome the frustration now. I've seen the frustration of labor ministers who say they are going to engage in massacre. That cannot be the solution. I've also seen the frustration of the associations in the health sector, in the resident doctors. Now we have the Professor Ken association. They should overcome those frustrations and return back to negotiation, to compromises, to discussion and trade all the facts. And I will also want the key labor sectors, labor centers, to also come in here to be able to provide the necessary support so that we get the issue resolved in an amicable way. I think the two parties should look at the bigger picture. The bigger picture is simple. That even without strike, infant mortality rate is one of the highest in Africa. Life expectancy in this country, it does about 49 compared to Ghana, about 57. Maternal mortality rate is scandal. There's the figure, out of 100,000 deliveries, we lose close to almost about 1,000 women who died. So even in a peacetime, our statistics with regards to health and safety completely miserable. So I think if we have to drive the need to save our life, because health is now wet, and in a condition of pandemic in which you have COVID-19 combined with avoidable health crisis like cholera, strike is a luxury, and the sacking of doctors is also a luxury. So the two parties have to come to the negotiating table, and I think we should find a way to trade all the numbers. And if there is a will, there will be the way to get the problem solved.